So, hello, friends. Steve Taylor here. Welcome to another episode of our podcast. We like to call it the Do It For Yourself podcast, where we like to bring on different business owners, artists, creators, and whatever shape of life and whatever it might be, and really just kind of talk to them about, their road traveled, what they're doing, lessons learned and stuff like that. And hopefully that those out there that are listening in, that you'll get some benefit from it. If you've listened before, great. Thank you so much for listening in. We appreciate you coming back and spread the word. And if you ever have ideas for different topics and the like, please let us know. So today I have a great guest. She's a good friend. She's a really, really cool person. We've spent a lot of different time together, her, my wife, and ourselves. And she does something really, really cool. And so I'm excited to have this conversation for those of you that haven't heard about it before or anything, to learn about it. Tanya, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Steve. So I'm Tanya Bravo. I'm the artistic director of Juggernaut Theater Company based here in Miami, Florida. And we focus on producing primarily immersive theater, which your amazing wife is part of right now. We're doing a show that's called Conjuring the King. And it's about a woman who runs an Elvis fan club, and it's only 15 people at a time. And those 15 people are invited as fans into her fan club. And we'll get into details of, all the different things that it's actually about, because it's more than just being part of a fan club. It's also set in a secret location in Little River, Miami, and it's a whole bunch of fun. And we've been doing this now, immersive theater, since 2016, but we've been around since 1999.
So great. So Tanya, you really set up where I want to take this conversation. So you've been around, you've been in the business. I believe maybe you'll tell me if I'm right. You started as an actress. That's where is your first love. You went through it, and you started to creating your own theater company. Walk us a little bit through that. Like you were an actress, you're out there working. You have this idea maybe to, create the theater company. Tell us about the little early days of that and how that came about.
Yeah, so I graduated from Barry University and I did some theater there. I double majored in communications and theater, but I fell in love with it very early on. And right after I graduated, I started acting in a lot of the local theaters. And I would go every summer to New York to take workshops and stuff, because there wasn't a lot of that going on in Miami. You always had to leave Miami to take workshops and sort of get training. And there was, when you're an actor, there's a lot of waiting around, waiting for the next gig. And especially when you live in a town where there's not a lot of theaters, I had an impulse to start creating my own work. And we found a space off of Biscayne Boulevard. It's funny, it was an old motel. And it was a woman named Teresa Pooler. I think she's a judge now, and she owned the space. Her brother was an actor, and he had a little bookstore there called Drama 101. And this is like before Amazon, before we were like, getting our scripts online. We would actually go purchase our scripts. So we would go there all the time. And, I got to really know her. And she said, you could take one of our rooms or two of our rooms and you could create whatever you want with it. And so we ended up creating a little black box theater in this space. And that's kind of the early gestation of Juggernaut Theater Company and where we started, which is funny because fast forward to 2016, we started, producing Miami Motel stories. And it was like, ooh, this is kind of like full circle. We started in a motel and then we ended in a motel. So yeah, that's kind of the early days of how we got started.
And how was that? So how was that? I think a lot of people, a lot of artists, they do have that urge to kind of produce their own pieces and items like that. How was that, creating your own theater company? How did those look, right? Those shoestring budgets, those getting your friends to act for you. How were those days?
I want to say it was probably some of our best work, because as you may know, when you're doing like entrepreneurial work, you're kind of just jumping in, and you don't have sort of the past experiences of like where you can fail. So you just do it. right? You just like, you jump right in and we're like, yeah, we're going to start a theater company. It's off Biscayne Boulevard. At that time, it was like a really dangerous neighborhood, but we were like, if we build it, they will come. And they did, which was really interesting. And yeah, we produced probably about 6 or 7 shows in that space. Some of them won Carbonell Awards, some of them were nominated. So it was a very sort of like raw, in your face type of theater. I mean, very, very small. Sometimes the audience was locked in there. And I think we were kind of doing immersive theater, but we didn't know it yet. But I think like the lessons that we learned there is to just like go for it, right? And not think too much. And during that time, I was also learning how to write grants and learning sort of the business side of what it takes to put these things on their feet.
Yeah, I remember the early days, especially in my entrepreneurial journey. You don't know what you don't know, and you
Exactly.
jump into it, and you're fearless, right? There's nothing here to fear. Let's just go. Let's go do it, and great things happen, right? Because you don't slow down and think about it, and it's the wonderful, exciting time. Unfortunately, as we get older, sometimes we lose that, right? So that's always the challenge, to keep that fearlessness, to keep that drive and moving forward. So, you said, you were there, you guys are doing great work, you're getting a lot of awards, you're being recognized. Talk a little bit about this concept. I guess you said about 2015, you started the Immersive Theater. Where did this come from? Why did this start happening, or what did you see that wanted you to go in this direction?
So there was probably like a 10-year gap between the time that because I left to New York. I had the theater company. I left to New York with the premise of doing Miami and New York shows in both cities. I had a partner here. But very quickly I was like, okay, this is really difficult to do, especially if I'm not in that city. And when I moved to New York, my career slowly went into a different direction. I started working with MySpace. MySpace Music. I worked with a lot of big brands. So I'm giving you really like the cliff notes of this, but I started a music festival first that was Miami, New York. And that was kind of like my first introduction onto how to work with brands in the lifestyle realm. And then went to MySpace Music, also worked with a digital online company called Remescla, and then ended up in Heineken. So in 2015, I had, always working within music, entertainment, I mean, Grammys, like all of it, you name it. But I really wanted to go back to my roots. I was really missing theater, where the impulse for all of this came from. So even though I was working in lifestyle, I was like, I want to go back to my roots. And I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do, but I did go and take a workshop with the Labyrinth Theater Company, which is Philip Seymour Hoffman's company. And I went away for 1 week and I was completely just immersed. I'm going to use that word again, and everything theater from every different way. And in that workshop, I met a few key people that changed my career path. One of the person's names was Tamila Woodard, who would then be the director of the first Miami Motel stories. After I did that workshop, it became super clear to me that I wanted to go back to theater, but I wanted to do it a different way, and I didn't know. She invited me to participate as an actor in an immersive show in New York that was called Broken City. And it basically took the audience members through the Lower East Side. And it was like one audience member at a time, and you would end up in a retail store and you would learn about that neighborhood that way. And I thought, this is the future of theater. I was like, this is it, right? I was feeling
Was that
like,
new at that time? Was that a new concept? Had this been around a while, that it was in New York or other places, or was this kind of like this was a brand new form of theater?
So it isn't a brand new form of theater. It's been around for a really long time. I just think it's taken some time to really catch on.
Yeah.
But my initial impulse was that, oh gosh, this is what I want to do. This is what people need. People need to be in the same space as other people. People need to feel empathy. People need to feel what it feels like to be in somebody else's shoes. And because we live in a society right now that is like technology based and everything is immediate, this really forces you to kind of like slow down and be present in the moment, which is something that I feel like humans really need. Even though we're like so attached to our phones and all of that, you would be surprised, like in our shows, everybody puts their phones away and they're present. We need that as humans. So that is the cliff notes of how I ended in 2016 doing Miami Motel stories. And I can get into, if you want me to get into that, I can get into that too.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, let's talk about that. So you said you met this lady, Tamila Woodard, as you mentioned,
Tamila,
and changed Tamara, and change your attitude towards this and all the like. So you had this idea, you experienced it up there. How was it initially bringing this concept down to Miami? And then maybe the first execution, kind of how did that go? Was it as the same challenges as before when you were down producing, or did it present new challenges?
Well, I came back to Miami and I was like, I love immersive theater, but I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, you know? But at the time I was kind of having these little meetups with Juan Sanchez, who's the playwright of Miami Motel Stories. And we would just, my family lived around the corner from this like Starbucks that's on Miracle Mile, and we would just bump into each other there. And he told me about a show that he was working on called I'm gonna slaughter the name, Paradise Hotel, I think it is, or Paradise Motel. And it took place in one room over the course of several decades in a neighborhood. And I said to him, wow, that's, you know, incredible. And he already opened it at a theater company. It's MTC now. And it did really, really well. But I asked him, I was like, I love this concept. What if we took this concept and we did it in a motel? And what if whatever motel we went to, that neighborhood, you know, we went through the decades in that neighborhood. And that's how the idea came about. And so he started writing the play. I applied for a Knight Foundation grant for this concept, Miami Motel Stories, and we got it. And I was like, oh my God, now we gotta do it. Right. So it's that thing again of like, okay, we're just gonna throw the concept out there and we're gonna see if it latches on. And so we got it. And it was really serendipitous how everything happened, because I had a friend who knew these developers, Bill Fuller and Martine Inia, and he said, you know, you should talk to them. They have a really cool motel in Little Havana. And I was like, okay, perfect, Little Havana. And I went in there, and because I had now all my past experience working with all these brands and everything, and I knew how to do the PowerPoint presentation, I went in there with like my pitch of what this was about. And they said, I mean, I would think I was like on the second slide, and they were like, yes, let's do this, because they were big, you know, history buffs. And this was all about the history of that neighborhood. And not only that, but they knew the history of that whole, the motel deeply. Henry Sheckman, who was one of the owners, who also owned Ball and Chain, and that Billie Holiday stayed there. So for us, that was just this really wonderful opening to another world that they let us kind of dig deep into. And then what ended up happening is I pitched it to Tamila Woodard, who was the woman that I experienced immersive theater with for the first time. And I asked her to direct the piece. And she's actually partners. She has a theater company that's called Pop-Up Theatrics, and she's partners with Anna Maggiano, who is actually directing the show right now, Conjuring the King. And she's also directed another Miami Motel Stories and the Blues Opera. So that's how that all begun. And we worked with Juan Sanchez. Then it was like everybody was knocking on our doors to do a Miami Motel Stories, and it was fantastic. But it was also really, really exhausting. And one of those things that we literally, until COVID hit, we were on this kind of, you know, race, and we didn't stop doing Miami Motel Stories for 4 years in a row. And it was really intense time for us.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's really cool. I've gone to a lot of shows throughout my life, primarily because of my wonderful wife. But what's unique is most people, when they go to theater, they're used to sitting, you sit out in the audience, you sit in chairs, you see people up on stage in front of you. This is completely different. So for someone that's never really experienced immersive theater, tell them, why they'd want to, or maybe why they wouldn't want to, right? What's different and unique about it?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that you're an active participant in the show. The audience really holds a lot of power in immersive theater. You get to make choices, you get to decide where you want to walk, what you want to touch. It's completely a 360 experience, meaning it's happening around you all the time. So no matter where you look, you are part of the experience. The actor talks directly to you. In some cases, they won't, if it's sort of like a voyeuristic, I'm just watching sort of thing. But in most cases, you're part of the experience, and you're walking through the spaces, and you can touch things. And the sets are always incredible, because I always say they're almost like movie sets, because there's so much detail, because we know that the audience can actually see absolutely everything. And that set actually, I think, becomes another character in the show. And you're immersed. I mean, I would say, if you've ever done virtual reality, if you ever done like AR, it's the closest thing to that, except with humanity. And by humanity, I mean, you're in a space, you're sharing energy with sometimes just a handful of people, but sometimes you may be in a space with like 30 or 40 people, but you're all having that experience at the same time. And I would say the most important thing in the storytelling process is it gives you the ability to stand in the shoes of someone else, to stand in their home, to stand with them in the same space. And it really creates a great sense of empathy. And that's why I think it's really important for storytelling. And we're seeing it more and more and more in theater right now. It's hot right now.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it was so cool, like you mentioned, that but the prior shows, you were at different motels in different places, and the few that I've been to, I would say it's almost like the geography, the location is the star of the show, right? It's as if all these ghosts came out of the ground and they're telling that story, and you're educating people on it. And I think this current one's a little different, right? It's you create a set. It's still, I mean, but a lot of it, but it's still focused on history, things that have happened in the past. In fact, you use the term conjuring. Why is it in this immersive theater, right, that the history and the connection to the past and bringing those things together, it really seems like that's become really a wonderful part about your theater company. Why is that so important?
Yeah, so I think we do two things. We do site-specific theater, meaning that the site is actually part of the show, right? So generally we go to a space, and then our playwright will write around that space, especially for Miami Motel stories, because where's the location, the history of what has happened in that space, what has happened in that neighborhood, what does the space actually tell us that we can take and build within the story. So that's true site-specific theater. Because immersive theater, you can do immersive theater anywhere, and it doesn't necessarily have to be site-specific. In the case of Conjuring the King, you will find out through the show that it is truly site-specific, because at the end, and I don't want to give it away, we say where we actually are and what she's transformed the space into. And that's something that I would love for Juggernaut to always do. And in this case, it's a little bit of a surprise, but we are where we are. And we don't like to ignore that. So I think in the case of Miami Motel stories and Wynwood stories, and even the blues opera, which you saw, which was in a little duplex in Little Havana, the site, the space is super, super important. We don't ignore that. We are where we are, and we build it into the story.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. I think a lot of people that maybe would want to create a theater company out there, they would say, well, where can we do it, right? Where can we get, be on a stage? And like you learn from early on in your days, it doesn't matter. Someone's going to give us a room. We're going to go do it there. or you'll move around and you'll start, moving all these different locations and make the best of where you're at, which is really what entrepreneurs do. They get what they've been given, right? You make the best out of it, and it really, to your point, it creates these great unique experiences that really everyone can enjoy.
Yeah, I feel like being nomadic gives us a little bit more freedom. Obviously, financially, it helps us that we don't have a theater with 300 seats or 400 seats that we have to fill and do four shows a season. We like going to different locations. It can be very challenging sometimes, but it also frees us up. I'm teaching a class at New World School of the Arts right now, and that's something that that you just mentioned that I love to tell the kids, like, if you have an actor and you've got some, stage managers and some creative people on your team, you can create theater anywhere. You can go to a park, you can go to an abandoned building, you can do it in somebody's apartment. You can create these pieces. And that's what I love about immersive theater and site specific, that you're kind of like, you're breaking down these walls, this like structure that's been around for a really long time, and you're breaking that down a little bit. And I love like this, giving the audience a little bit more power. Usually we're just kind of like sitting back and watching and clapping, where this year you're really, really involved from the very beginning, from the moment that you walk through the door. And we like to involve our people from the moment that they get the email. The email is generally from one of the characters in the show. Yeah. Telling you where to go, how to get there. So the experience starts from that very moment.
Yeah, I love that. The benefits of being nomadic, right? So you can imagine if you were a different theater company, let's say the traditional, and you want to be on a stage, well, you'd be negotiating leases, you'd be, contracts with the space, and you'd have all so much of your capital going towards that. I mean, it's really a great lesson for almost any business owner, right? This concept of nomadic. It's you. What are you giving? What's a service you're delivering, right? And focusing on that rather than other things that might hold you down and keep you back from where you're going. And it makes really anything possible. And that's kind of what the world we live in nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, I think we learned that during COVID. I think a lot of like really, big, these big corporations that, have these huge buildings, and they notice, oh, well, our employees are working just as hard from home. And maybe it's even easier for them because they can pick up their kids and all that good stuff. So I think, this idea of like, this structure that we've created for everything, and it's something that's been around forever, like being able to break that down and try to look at things from different directions is a lot of what we do with immersive theater. Like I said, it comes with their challenges, because for instance, when we would go into one of the buildings of Miami Motel stories, we're like, oh my gosh, plumbing and AC and things that you wouldn't generally have to deal with like at a theater. Oh my gosh, we have a lighting grid. Well, our lighting is kind of at times the action is done by the actor, so it's a lamp that they turn on. So there's different ways around it, and we have to be really thrifty, and we're a very lean team, but we love the challenge. It's a lot of fun.
I love it. I love it. So Tanya, you've been Juggernaut. It's been around for a long time now. It's really reinvented itself about 9 years ago. So what are you thinking about? What's the future? What are the things that you want to do? What are you aspirational for? Where you're hoping and you're seeing where you guys are going?
Yeah, I mean, we want to continue to do what we're doing. We had to close down during COVID, which was really difficult for us. March 13th, right? We had our show in North Beach. And after that, what we did was kind of interesting. I really felt the need of going back to the basics, like what is the essence of immersive theater? And we found that in doing these smaller shows, right? For 15 people, one actor at a time, and really kind of diving into, the essence of what this thing is, and because it's really easy to get caught up of like, okay, we need to get this many people through the door and all of that. And yes, we want a lot of people to go through the door and ticket sales and all of that. But if we want to become experts at what we do, then I always think, let's go back to basics of like, what does this actually mean? So yes, I do plan on probably doing another Miami Motel stories and bringing that back. And I'm sure it'll be a different iteration of how we do it. But I am having, and I think our team is having a lot of fun and sort of breaking that mold, because that was such a brand, right? Miami Motel Stories. I mean, for some time, people were like, who's Juggernaut? Miami Motel Stories, right? And so for us, it's also important to do other types of work. We do want to continue Miami Motel Stories, but what else do we do? I mean, we did a lot of stuff online. Now we're doing these one-person immersive shows. The show that we're doing right now, Conjuring the King, I want to say is probably one of the most challenging shows that I myself have ever had to produce.
Why?
Well, we have two casts, right? So the show runs Wednesday through Sunday. So essentially, and I always talk to Anna Margiano, our director, about this, like, wow, we kind of overestimated how difficult it was going to be like rehearsing two casts at the same time. It ended up being beautiful because they're two, even though it's the same story, because you have two different, very unique actresses, they're different. You can come back and see it again and have a totally different experience. The show, because it's about a woman that is really obsessed in fandom with Elvis, my sister and I, Natasha Bravo, who also produces with me, we took on the roles of, we were like, oh, we're going to do the props for this show. The props for this show is a woman that's obsessed with Elvis. So we had to go out and get memorabilia, right? From Facebook Marketplace and eBay and all these places. And we were like, we got 2 boxes from this guy who had it's kind of like that show Pickers, where you buy storage units, and he's like, I have all this stuff. I mean, literally, this is us like finding people. And so we came back to the space and we were like, we got it all. We put it all up on the wall and we didn't even scratch the surface. So up until the day that we opened, we were sourcing all this Elvis memorabilia. So that is something that we overestimated. It's the hardest project that I've worked on, but the most beautiful project that I work on. I love our team. We have an incredible team. It's completely different than anything we've ever done. We're going, I think a lot of people think that they're coming to this Elvis fan club experience, but don't realize that we're really going deep into a psychological journey of what this woman goes through being an obsessed fan, and how does she come out through the other side. So there's so many layers to it. I can go on and on about like the production and building, but yeah, so I want to continue doing this type of work and working with different playwrights and building our creative team even further. It's been amazing. It's been a really amazing experience, all of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So Tanya, let me ask you, I have not given you any advance warning here, so you can take a moment on this, but I always like to end up these interviews with the questions. So if you could go back and talk to younger Tanya, and you tell me whatever time period you want, 10 years ago, 15 years, 20 years ago, whatever it might be, and you could tell younger Tanya something that you know now that you wish you knew then, that would maybe have made the biggest impact or the biggest lesson learned, what would you tell younger Tanya?
I think I would tell younger Tanya to slow down a bit, to really take care of her energy, to really some self-care, because I think when you're younger and you're so excited and you want to go, we don't realize what that does to our energy, to our psyche, all of those things. And I wish that I would have enjoyed the process a little bit more while it was happening, and not try to keep going so fast, like stop and go, okay, what did I just do? Because I don't think I did that until COVID hit.
Yeah.
And that's not really younger Tanya, but I think I did that a lot through my career, where and that happens a lot, right? Like we do the thing, we do the incredible thing, but we don't enjoy it while we're doing it because we're too busy doing it. So I wish I would have stopped a lot more during the process and kind of gone, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe I did that.
Yeah, I think all of us could say that, because we can look back now, and this is something Susie and I talk about a lot. We look at all the stuff that we've done, right? We might not have been able to fully appreciate it back then, but we've been through it. We've had so many experiences. We are like the experts, right? Yes, certain challenges will present themselves that were unexpected, but you know what you're doing. You know what you know, and it doesn't need to be that hard. And with less effort, it can almost be a greater success, right? And being very smart and slow and strategic about it. I think it's a great lesson for anyone out there, especially when you've been doing it for a while. It doesn't have to be hard. You know what you're doing. And it's going to, it's just going to be exponentially, the rewards going to be that much greater.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Tanya, I really, really appreciate your time. We will put all the information, anybody, all the different means where we distribute this. I'll have information on you, on the show, on Juggernaut and everything. But I really appreciate you spending some time with me.
Yes, and thank you for having me. I always listen to all your podcasts. It's amazing what you're doing and all the information that you're giving people that is like so needed for entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for having me. Loved
Thanks,
our
Tanya.
convo. Bye.